Okay, let's dive in. You know the feeling, right? When you're just wading through tons of information, maybe a really dense research paper or a super long report, and you desperately need to boil it all down,
Mm-hmm.
make it quick, visual, something someone can just get. It's tough, especially I think when you're talking about something like an academic poster, trying to fit it all in one page.
Oh, absolutely. Academic posters are, well, they're critical for sharing complex stuff, especially in science and research. At a conference, you literally have seconds to grab someone and convey maybe years of work.
Right.
But actually turning that, say, 20-page paper into one single coherent page, weaving text and graphics together, respecting those tight space limits, it's incredibly hard.
Yeah, it's not just like cutting words, is it? You got to pick the absolute most crucial points, find the right visuals, make them work with the text.
And make sure it all fits without looking like a mess or having text just spill out everywhere. It's
Yep.
like a design puzzle on top of a huge summarization puzzle.
Exactly.
And that need to really tightly mix the modes, the text, the figures, the tables, while hitting those strict spatial constraints, that's what makes it so unique and, frankly, so hard to automate.
So naturally, with a task that's so important but so time-consuming, researchers are asking, can AI help here? Can we actually automate creating these complex visual summaries?
And we've got a research paper that digs right into that question. It looks at how you might automate making scientific posters directly from the papers themselves.
That sounds fascinating. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. First, unpack why this poster task is way harder than just, say, making slides.
Right.
Then explore how researchers are trying to figure out if automated systems are actually any good at this. Like, how do you even measure success?
The evaluation piece is key.
And finally, reveal a really promising new approach using AI agents to tackle this visual and textual beast.
Basically, think of this as your shortcut to understanding where things are at with automating these really complex document-to-visual tasks.
Okay, let's get right into it then. Why are academic posters so much harder to automate than maybe generating PowerPoint slides?
Well, the biggest thing is that single-page constraint. It's fundamental. With slides, you can take an idea and, spread it out. 10 slides, 20, whatever. Each one might just have a couple of bullet points, maybe an image.
Yeah, lots of space.
But a poster forces you to condense the entire story of a research paper, the background, methods, results, conclusion onto one single canvas. It all has to be there coherently.
And the source material itself.
Mm.
It's huge compared to that output, right? I saw the paper mention some data on this.
Oh, yeah. The papers in their dataset averaged, get this, over 22 pages long. That translates to more than 20,000 text tokens, the little bits of words AI models process, plus an average of over 22 figures per paper.
22 pages and 22 figures.
And the target, a poster, one page, usually around 1,400 tokens of text, maybe 8 or 9 figures. You're looking at compressing the text by more than 14 times, and cutting the figures by more than half. It's just a massive information bottleneck.
And it's not just summarizing, like we said. You have to arrange it. The text needs to sit next to the right graphic. They need to reference each other visually, tell a story together.
Exactly.
Right.
And the layout demands are just brutal. This is where spatial constraints really comes into play. If your text boxes overflow, or figures cover up text, or things aren't lined up, the whole thing falls apart. It's unreadable.
Right.
And your standard AI models, like large language models for text, or even vision language models that understand images, they kind of struggle with this layout stuff on their own. They don't inherently have that feedback loop to check, does this actually look right? Does it fit on the page?
So they can generate the words or pick the images, maybe, but controlling where they go and making sure they fit visually. That's the tricky part.
Precisely.
Okay, so if it's such a tough visual and textual challenge for AI, how are researchers actually measuring if a system is doing a good job?
Yeah.
How do you evaluate this?
Yeah, this is a really important part of the paper. They introduce what they call the Paper2Poster benchmark. It's basically the first of its kind specifically for this task.
Okay, a benchmark. Always need a good benchmark. What's in it?
So they collected 100 pairs of recent AI conference papers, from top places like ICML, NeurIPS, ICLR, and crucially, the actual posters that the human authors designed for those papers.
Ah, so real-world examples.
Exactly. And it's a tough data set, too. It includes some pretty long papers, up to 50 pages, to really push the systems on that compression challenge.
And they didn't just collect the data, right? They built a whole evaluation system around it.
That's right. They realized a good poster isn't just one thing, so they have this comprehensive framework with 4 different angles for assessing quality.
4 dimensions. Okay, what are they?
First is visual quality. Pretty straightforward. This looks at things like, does the AI poster look similar overall to a human one? And importantly, are the figures actually relevant to the text they're placed next to?
Makes sense. Does it look right? Are the pictures in the right spots? Got it.
Second, textual coherence. For this, they use a standard AI metric called perplexity, or PPL. Basically, lower PPL usually means the text flows better. It's more predictable for a language model.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They found something surprising. Human-made posters often had higher perplexity than the original paper text.
Huh. That sounds backwards. Why would the human text be sort of less smooth on the poster?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive at first, but the paper suggests a key insight. Human authors, when they make a poster, they're likely prioritizing quick visual communication and brevity over perfect flowing sentences.
Oh, okay.
They might use sentence fragments, lots of bullet points, maybe caption figures in a way that if you read the text alone, it feels a bit choppy. But on the poster itself, visually, it works better for someone scanning quickly. So higher PPL isn't automatically bad in this context.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Communication over grammatical perfection for that format. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the third evaluation dimension?
This one's clever. It's the holistic assessment. They use a very capable vision language model, GPT-4o, specifically, essentially as a judge.
An AI judging another AI's work.
Yep. They feed the generated poster image to GPT-4o and ask it to score the poster on 6 different criteria. Things like element quality, layout balance, engagement, clarity, content completeness, and logical flow.
So it's like an automated design critic.
Pretty much. And a really key finding that came out of this VLM-as-judge approach was that engagement seems to be the biggest bottleneck right now for the automated systems.
Engagement, meaning?
Meaning how visually captivating it is. Does it grab your attention, make you want to read it? The AI systems could often get the basic information across and the layout mostly okay, but making something truly visually appealing and engaging, that's where they still lag significantly behind humans.
Yeah, that rings true. Aesthetics and appeal are often the hardest parts to automate. Okay, now the fourth metric. You said this was the really interesting part.
It really is. It's called PaperQuiz. And the whole point of PaperQuiz is to directly measure how well a poster actually transmits the core knowledge of the paper to someone who only sees the poster.
Okay, how on earth do they measure that?
It's quite ingenious. First, they use another language model to automatically generate 100 multiple choice questions about each paper. Half the questions are basically, find the answer in the text, verbatim style.
Right.
But the other half are interpretive. They require actually understanding the concepts, the implications, not just finding a sentence.
Okay, so comprehension questions.
Exactly. Then they take the poster image generated by whatever system they're testing, and they feed only that image to several different vision language models. These VLMs act like simulated readers with different levels of background knowledge. And these VLM readers have to answer the 100-question quiz based only on what they can understand from looking at the poster image.
Wow, okay. So AI #1 writes a quiz on the paper. AI #2 makes a poster from the paper. Then AI #3 and #4, #5 take the quiz, but they can only study using the poster image from AI #2.
You got it. It's a fascinating setup to quantify how much useful knowledge someone can actually pull just from the visual presentation.
That's a really smart way to measure how effective the presentation is.
Absolutely. And they have a scoring system, including something called a density augmented score. This rewards posters that manage to convey more correct answers within the limited space, basically. It favors concise, effective delivery over just dumping lots of text onto the page.
And what did PaperQuiz reveal? What's the big insight?
Well, first, the scores correlated pretty well with human judgments of how informative posters were. But more importantly, it showed that the stronger VLM readers, the ones simulating more expert knowledge, actually benefited more from a well-designed condensed poster than from just having the whole dense paper.
Interesting. So a good summary is better than the raw data, especially for those who know the field.
It seems so. It really validates that PaperQuiz is measuring the quality of the presentation and its ability to transfer knowledge efficiently, not just checking if the information is technically present somewhere.
Okay, so we've got the challenge. Massive compression, tricky visuals. We've got a new benchmark and these clever evaluation metrics like PaperQuiz. What's the actual proposed solution in this paper? How do they try to build this AI poster maker?
They introduce a framework called PosterAgent. It's designed specifically for this complex multimodal context compression job.
PosterAgent. Okay, what's the approach?
They describe it as a top-down, visual-in-the-loop, multi-agent pipeline.
Okay, let's break that down. Multi-agent pipeline.
Means it breaks the big task into smaller steps, and different specialized AI agents handle different steps in a sequence. Top-down implies it starts with the overall structure and then refines details.
And visual in the loop.
That's the crucial bit. It means the system actually looks at the visual output during the process and uses that visual information to make corrections and improvements.
A pipeline makes sense for something this complicated. What are the main stages or agents?
There are 3 core modules. First up is the parser. You can think of this one as the distiller.
Okay.
It takes the raw input, the paper PDF, and its job is to extract all the potential building blocks for the poster summaries of each section, the figures, any tables, their captions, and organize them into a structured library of assets.
So it reads the paper and pulls out the pieces. What tools does it use?
They mention using things like marker and dockling. These are specialized tools for document understanding, good at parsing PDFs and extracting structured content. This parser does that first big chunk of compression, just getting the key elements out.
You got it. Step 1, get the ingredients. What's next?
Next comes the planner. This agent is the arranger. Its job is twofold. First, it looks in the text summaries and the visual assets from the parser and matches them up, semantically figuring out which figure goes with which text section. Second, it designs the overall layout. It uses a strategy they call a binary tree layout. It's a way to divide the poster space into nested regions, planning panel by panel, trying to balance the content length in each panel and maintain a logical reading order.
So it maps out where things should go.
Exactly. And as part of this planning, it also further condenses the text for each planned panel into concise bullet points, making it suitable for that poster format.
Okay, so parser gets the stuff, planner arranges it, and summarizes more. What's the third module? You mentioned visual feedback.
Yes, this is where the visual in the loop part really happens. It's the painter-commenter loop. This is an iterative process.
Painter and commenter.
Right. For each panel that the planner laid out, the painter agent takes the planned content, text, bullet points, figure references, and translates it into actual rendering code. They used Python deck PPTX, basically instructions to draw that panel in a format like PowerPoint. It creates a draft image of just that one panel.
So it actually generates a picture of that section.
Precisely. But then before moving on, the commenter agent steps in. The commenter is a powerful VLM, like GPT-4o again. It looks at the rendered image of the panel that the painter just made.
Ah, okay, the visual check.
Exactly. And it provides feedback based on visual rules. It might say, hey, the text in this box is overflowing, or this area looks too blank, or elements aren't aligned.
Like a little automated proofreader, but for the layout?
Kind of, yeah. And they help the commenter make good judgments by giving it examples. They call it zoom in and in-context reference, showing it what good panels look like versus bad ones with overflow or spacing issues.
I see.
Then the painter takes that feedback from the commenter and tries again, revising the rendering code for that panel. This loop painter makes it, commenter critiques it, painter fixes it, continues until the commenter says the panel looks okay, or they hit a maximum number of tries.
And this happens for each panel sequentially.
That's right. They build the poster panel by panel, refining each one with this visual feedback loop before moving to the next.
That iterative visual check seems absolutely critical for nailing those tough spatial constraints we talked about.
It seems to be, yes.
Okay, so that's PosterAgent. How did it actually do when they tested it using that Paper2Poster benchmark against other ways of doing this?
Well, it showed some pretty significant strengths, especially in the areas where, simpler approaches tend to fall down. They compared it against several baselines, traditional methods, big end-to-end models, other multi-agent systems without the visual loop.
And where did PosterAgent really stand out?
The big one was the PaperQuiz score, remember? That metric testing how much knowledge gets transferred just from the poster. PosterAgent got the best scores among all the automated methods they tested.
Better than others.
Yes, and here's a really telling detail. They tested a version of PosterAgent using a less powerful open-source model, Quinn, as its backbone. And even that version often outperformed baselines that were using the much more powerful GPT-4o trying to generate the poster in one big shot end-to-end.
Wow, okay, that's huge. It really suggests that the process breaking it down, planning the layout, that visual feedback loop, might be more important for this specific task than just having the single most powerful AI model available.
It strongly points in that direction, yes. The structured workflow seems key. PosterAgent also did well on the VLM-as-judge holistic scores, getting rated comparably to the human design posters for overall quality.
Nice.
And it was particularly good at figure relevance, putting the right pictures with the right text.
What about the weaknesses in the other methods? What did their analysis show went wrong there?
Yeah, their error analysis kind of highlights why PosterAgent's approach works better. For instance, they found that end-to-end models trying to generate the poster as one big image might create something that looks stylistically okay from afar. But when you actually zoom in, the text embedded in the image is often just garbage noisy, illegible, useless for actually reading.
Right, a fatal flaw for a poster.
Totally. Other multi-agent systems they tested, ones maybe lacking that strong visual feedback loop, often struggled with layout control. They'd end up with big empty white spaces or sometimes just completely miss, including important content sections from the paper. And methods that just tried to output, say, HTML, tended to generate these very text-heavy pages, more like a blog post or a web page, not really capturing that specific visually integrated format of an academic poster. They often lacked figures entirely.
Okay, that makes sense. A poster has a very specific visual language.
It does. And another really striking point from the paper was about efficiency, particularly cost.
The practical side.
PosterAgent turned out to be much more token efficient. Using that open source Quen model variant, they estimated the cost per poster could be incredibly low, like half a cent, 0.0055.
Half a cent per poster.
Yeah, compared to potentially much, much higher costs for systems relying heavily on large proprietary API calls for every step. That cost difference could be massive for anyone wanting to use this routinely.
Absolutely enormous. That could be the difference between it being a neat research project and a genuinely useful tool.
For sure. So kind of tying it all together, it really looks like PosterAgent's structured approach, planning the layout first, then rendering panel by panel with that iterative visual refinement is the key to its success, especially on that knowledge transfer metric, PaperQuiz.
Did they try removing parts of PosterAgent to see what happened?
They did. They ran ablation studies. And sure enough, taking out any of the main components, the structured binary tree layout planning, the commenter feedback loop, or even just the visual examples they gave the commenter, all of those changes significantly degraded the quality of the final poster. Each piece seems important.
Okay, so we've walked through the challenge, the evaluation, and this PosterAgent solution. Let's connect it back. What does all this mean for you listening? Why should you care about automating poster generation?
Well, fundamentally, this research shows real, tangible progress on automating a task that's currently, frankly, a huge time sink for many researchers and scientists. Taking a complex document and turning it into an effective visual summary like a poster takes hours, sometimes days.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the potential is freeing up researchers.
Exactly. Freeing them up to do more research, not wrestle with PowerPoint or Illustrator. But it's also about potentially improving how science is communicated. Better visual summaries could make complex findings more accessible, maybe speed up how discoveries spread.
And it's not just about academic posters, right? This core problem exists elsewhere.
Absolutely. Think about it. Summarizing dense, multimodal documents, text, charts, images into clear visual aids with tight space limits, that applies to so many things. Business reports, technical manuals, educational materials.
Creating visual instructions automatically from a manual, maybe?
Yeah.
Or summarizing a long company report into a one-page dashboard?
Potentially, yes. The core challenge is similar. And what this research really underscores, I think, is the power of breaking down these complex, almost creative tasks into smaller, manageable steps for AI. Especially when you build in that ability for the AI to effectively see and react to its own visual output.
It's not just about throwing a bigger model at the problem.
Right. It's about designing smarter workflows for the AI, enabling that kind of iterative refinement that humans do naturally. It makes you think where else this multi-agent visual feedback approach could be applied.
Okay, but it's not perfect yet, right? What are the current limitations they mentioned for PosterAgent?
The main one they highlighted is speed. Because it does that painter-commenter loop sequentially for each panel, refining one after the other, the whole process is a bit slow. They clocked it at around 4.5 minutes per poster on their hardware.
4.5 minutes? I mean, that's way faster than a human starting from scratch, but it's not instant.
No, not instant. And they clearly point to parallelizing that panel refinement, working on multiple panels at once, as an obvious next step to speed things up considerably.
Makes sense. If the panels are mostly independent, you could potentially refine them in parallel.
And looking even further out, they touched on some exciting future ideas, like Maybe incorporating external knowledge. Could the AI look at feedback on similar posters or trends in the research community?
Ooh, interesting.
Or enabling true human-AI collaboration. Imagine the AI generating a really solid first draft, maybe 90% of the way there, and then a human designer steps in for that final polish, adding the subjective touches, the real visual flair.
That feels like a very powerful combination.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive. It seems researchers are making some serious strides in automating what looked like a really tough creative and technical task, turning dense papers into effective academic posters.
Yeah, they've developed not just new AI systems like PosterAgent, but also crucial new ways to evaluate success, like PaperQuiz, that go beyond just text quality and look at actual knowledge transfer and visual layout.
And the PosterAgent approach itself, with its multi-agent pipeline and that iterative visual feedback loop, seems really promising for handling both the summarization and the tricky spatial constraints.
Exactly. There are definitely still challenges making the posters more visually engaging, speeding up the process, but this work shows a clear path forward for automating these complex document-to-visual tasks.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you to consider. As AI gets better and better at not just processing information, but summarizing it and presenting it visually in these effective constrained formats, how might that change things? How might it change how we consume knowledge, how discoveries get shared, maybe even how we learn and teach in the future?
It's a big question, definitely something worth thinking about as these capabilities continue to develop.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of automated poster generation.